Hey, welcome everybody to Pro Mindset Podcast. It's Craig Domann, your host, and my guest today is a gentleman that I think I used to watch your dad pitch back in the day, and you pitch in the major leagues. Todd Stottlemyre. Todd is a 3-time World Series champion, 2 as a player in the game, making it happen, and 1 being on the disabled list. And Todd is a father of 5. He's a husband. He's an author. He's an entrepreneur. He's a mindset guru. Todd, welcome to Pro Mindset.
Craig, man, what an honor, a pleasure. I know we got a mutual friend that somehow connected us, so I'm grateful. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, shout out to Tommy. Okay, so here's the deal. Pro Mindset is right up your alley. And, you know, when people hear that somebody played as a professional athlete for 15 years, they know they think differently than everybody else. And so what was that different for you?
Well, it was a process, so it's kind of crazy because, I grew up in the game. So, my father was a pitcher for the New York Yankees. So you would have thought that it would have come naturally just being around the game my entire life, hanging around Yankee Stadium and the clubhouse and being around. But, it's kind of like I remember my first time I'm wearing a major league uniform. I'm pitching in a game in Kansas City. They actually brought me in my rookie year out of the bullpen just to kind of get the bugs off a little bit before my first start. I remember standing on that mound, my back leg shaking. I couldn't swallow. And I was like, wow, this thing is real. So, I don't think you wake up overnight and you have this mindset. I think that, that type of mindset and resiliency and to go through all the setbacks and still be able to talk yourself into, hey, you're the best on this day and you can go and compete against the best in the world. That takes time and it needs to be developed. And I had a lot of help along the way. Ultimately there was a guy by the name of Harvey Dorfman in my major league career. He wrote The Mental Game of Baseball and Mental Game of Pitching. And he was just a massive asset, for my focus, my mindset, my perception. And really, ultimately, mindset is, I always talk about it as awareness. And, a lot of times we miss out on the awareness piece. And that is, what am I thinking and what am I focusing on? And so many times and in life and sports, we can be focused on the wrong things. We can be focused on things we can't even control. But yet we're driving all of our thoughts, focus, and energy to something we can't control that now leads into frustration, right? So to be able to kind of come back to it, it's like that awareness and getting that thought, the thought you want to have, and then the focus and energy towards that thought and breaking that thing down into the present moment. Without that, the game becomes so fast and so hard. When we talk a lot about, and as you know, it's like you got to figure out a way to slow the game down, and it's like people, I say, and if you'll tell someone that's never played professional athlete or athletics, it's like, hey, you got to slow the game down. They're like, they have no idea what you're talking about, but you slow the game down in your mind, right? And all of a sudden you start to see things and your perception is much clearer than it was when the game is coming at you.
Okay, Todd, let's go back. Let's go down memory lane for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that, this mindset development, it wasn't the same in year 15 as it was when you're a rook. Okay. And you went through a lot of ups and downs being a pitcher. You might get a strikeout, but you might also give up a home run. You've been in those situations where you did maybe do a complete game. They don't have complete games anymore. They're like dinosaurs.
Yeah, they're over.
We have a complete game. And, maybe the bases were loaded in the bottom of the ninth or, you had to get an out. My question is, at what point in your career, what pitch in your career, what game did you finally have the awareness that it was a mental challenge more than a physical challenge, that your willpower and your confidence were more important than actually the pitch that maybe you were even throwing?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. There's so many different pivots to that, but the one that was really the biggest, probably the biggest change for me in my life was we literally just won the 1993 World Series. and we had won in 1992. And, I was an average pitcher at that time on great teams. And I was frustrated with being average on a great team. I was like, and I just felt like, I was at that place where I had so much more in me, but what was I missing? And I also, not only on the field, but off the field, I was a very emotional person. I wore my heart on the sleeve. You knew exactly what I was thinking based on just watching me. And I didn't have to say a word. You could see it in my actions. And it was about a week after the 1993 World Series. And I was like, I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired of landing in the same place. I wanted more from myself. I wanted to become a better person off the field, but I wanted to become more on the field. And I felt like because I had glimpses, as you said, where it's like, hey, you throw a shutout, you throw a complete game. And then the next game, it's like, I'm getting kicked out of the game in the third inning for bumping an umpire. And it's like, well, who am I? Am I the guy that threw the complete game, or am I the guy that just bumped the umpire? Right. It's like, they look like two different pitchers, two different people. They're definitely different emotions, different focuses, different perceptions. I was like, I'm sick of this. I actually called my mentor. His name was Dave Stewart, 4-time 20-game winner for the A's. He was now my teammate. And I knew he had an awareness about this guru. And so I called him and I said, Dave, I'm going to ask you a question. When I say this name, I want the first thing that comes to your mind. And he says, okay, go. And I said, Harvey Dorfman. He said, call him now. And I said, Dave, I got to go. Thanks. Hung up the phone. I called Harvey. Harvey was this guru. He'd worked with a lot of guys in Major League Baseball and in sports and about focus and about mindset and about, all of the things and responsibility that comes with being a professional athlete. And I called Harvey and I said, Harvey, this is Todd Stottlemyre. And he laughed. And he goes, man, I've been waiting on this call. And I was like, I had no idea Harvey even knew who I was. It's not like, hey, this is Todd Stottlemyre. I was like, Harvey, this is Todd. And it was hilarious. And I was like, you've been waiting on this call. And I said, Harvey, I need to see you. And he said, yes, you do. And we literally booked a meeting. I was on the west coast of Florida. He was on the east coast of Florida. And he said, can you drive over? We picked a date. And it was for a 2-hour meeting. That was going to be the introduction to him starting to work with me. That 2-hour meeting went 12 hours. And in that 12-hour window, he peeled me back, man. I cried. We cried. We laughed. He had taken me to my knees. And about the first 30 minutes of our conversation, he asked me probably the most important life-changing question of my life, especially at that time. He said, would you do it again? And I looked at him. I was like, do what? He says, would you give that bone marrow transplant to your little brother again? I said, man. And I mean, I just bawled, and it was very emotional. And I said, Harvey, I'd do it every second of every minute of every hour of every day of every week of every month of every year. And he looked at me and he kind of paused and he says, why? Didn't you already do that? And I said, yeah. He says, did you do everything you could possibly do? I said, I think so. And he looked at me and he says, well, then it's time to forgive yourself for the beating you've put yourself through. And it's time to let it go. And what's crazy is it was the first time in 12 years that someone gave me permission to let it go, that it wasn't my fault. See, 12 years prior to that, after giving my little brother the bone marrow transplant, and my transplant, my marrow put him into a coma that ultimately took his life. And standing over my little brother, the sadness obviously was there. Our family was taken to our knees. We went through a tragedy. I know there's listeners out there that have probably gone through similar tragedy. But I was a 15-year-old boy. They gave his 11-year-old little brother that transplant. And I was playing killer. I was playing victim. I was taking responsibility for his death. And even though the doctors and my parents were like, man, you did everything you could, it had nothing to do with you. I was a 15-year-old boy with a mind of my own saying, it's my fault. It was my marrow. I just killed him. And so I went through sadness. I went through guilt. It was hard for me to look at my parents. They had to bury their 11-year-old son. And then I had this anger that came over me and ran through my veins from head to toe. I hated the freaking world, and I was just so hateful. It's like, how in the world, how is it fair that my 11-year-old little brother is gone? And I'll never forget. And then fast forward into that Harvey meeting, he says, you did everything you could. It's time to let it go. And then he also says something that was vitally important. He says, Todd, you're not God. You didn't have the power to save him. And he says, and then, you know, like I say, it was unbelievable. It was like an elephant was taken off my back and shoulders, but not forever, because it was just the beginning of a healing process. You see, I had wired into my mind those thoughts and emotions of playing victim to my little brother's death. And I'd played and rewind it so many times, I became a person with guilt and hate literally running through my veins. It was interesting because, and it's been a process, and it was a process and is a process. And you know, and I can talk about this today much differently than I could a decade ago, and certainly much different than I could back in 1993. But the last 30 minutes of our meeting in that 12-hour window, Harvey put me on also a 7-day test. And he said, are you willing to go through a 7-day challenge? I go, I'm all in. I just want to get better. I want to be better. And he says, for the next 7 days, and it was the off season, he says, you're not allowed to compete. And I competed at everything. You played card game, man, I was playing to win, right? It didn't matter what it was, golf game, card, any of my buddies. And it's like, and a lot of times the emotions can run high. He said, listen, anytime you start to feel anger or those emotions start to build within, he says, you're not allowed to react or respond. He says, all you can do is document. And I want you to write down for the next 7 days, every time you get upset, every time something pisses you off. And I want you to write down what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And I was like, I'm in. At the end of the 7 days, we got back together, and it was like time to build the tool chest. And Harvey, we went through everything that I journaled. And Harvey peeled back and he said, every time you got pissed off, you were focused on something you couldn't control. And I was like, wow. He says, you see, Todd, he said, and it goes back to being in, now he put me on the baseball field. And he said, runners are first and second, or the bases are loaded, whatever. He said, if you're thinking about how those guys got on, whether it was a blue pit, guy hit a double, you hit a guy, you walked a guy, if you're focused on how they got on, you're focused on the wrong thing and you're messing up. He basically said, you're messing up the opportunity for your greatness. See, your past is getting in the way of your future greatness. He says, you see, the past of your little brother, what you hung on to, because you had no control on whether he was going to live or die, everything that you have encountered since then that you can't control, you explode, you lose your emotions. And all it's doing is destroying your greatness in the present moment. And I said, okay, I understand it. But he says, look, and we came up with some tools. One was the 180-degree mindset. I live with it today. The 180-degree mindset says that if you don't like your thought, how you're feeling, those emotions, change the channel. We have the power to change what we're thinking. We have the challenge, our perception. We can look at it a lot of different ways. We have power to change emotions. We can change our emotions anytime we want. We have to first understand we have the power to change those emotions. And it's like, and then it became also 180-degree mindset. And then it's the let it go syndrome. If you can't control it, let it go. Stop wasting on time and energy on things you can't control. Now he puts me on a major league mound with the bases loaded. What can I control? I can't control how they got there. They're already there. It's already happened. There's no reason to even think about it. He says the only thought you can have, and this was a game changer for me. He said, Todd, as soon as the ball leaves your hand, he says, you're no longer in control. He says, it might be a ball, might be a strike. Hitter might foul it off. He might hit a home run. He might ground out to the shortstop. He might swing and miss. That's on him. That's not on you. You've already done everything you can do. So when the ball leaves your hand, you're now out of control. And the next moment that you're going to be in control is when the ball's back in your hand, not until. He says, so whatever happens, you have to be okay and be able to let it go so that you can get into the present moment So on the very next pitch, and be able to tap into your greatness and just focus on what you can control. This was game changing for me. And it's crazy because if you look at my pitching statistics, if you look at me just statistically from 88 to 93, that's a different pitcher and a different person than from the time I worked with Harvey, which is the winner of 93. So it would have been the 94 season until I finished. And if you look at me statistically, you say, there's two different pitchers. And a lot of people will say, yeah, well, maturity. Yeah, but it was that maturity was a process. It was a mindset. And I needed help to identify, to create this awareness. So Harvey would talk to me a lot about awareness. And in this awareness is, look, at any point of any day, we can stop and ask ourselves, why do we feel the way we feel? What are we focused on? What are we thinking? You don't like it? Change the channel. I mean, let's think about it and break it down. Who wants to feel angry? It's like, who wants to have anxiety? Who wants to be stressed out? When you're stressed out, you have anxiety, you're overwhelmed, or you're angry because you probably focused on the wrong thing, or you're focused on something that's already happened, or something that you can't even control. So freaking let it go and move on. And then Harvey came up. This is beautiful. The next question is, what can I do now? And if you ask yourself the question in the biggest storm and stress of your life, what can I do? You'll realize that you can't fly that plane in the middle of turbulence because you're not a pilot. So let it go, right? It's like, hey, I can't control the home run I just gave up. So why am I still thinking about it? And why am I emotionally upset about something that it's already gone? And by the way, this is possible for everyone. It just takes practice, it takes awareness, and it takes a willingness to strive for greatness. And not everyone has that willingness because of what it takes. That's a mouthful.
Okay, so my condolences for your brother.
Thank you.
Even though it was a long time ago,
Long time
I
ago.
know that it's still there. It's still there. Is your mom still alive?
She is.
Okay, so it's still there for her. I promise you. I
Yeah.
know. Any parent that loses a kid, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
So my history is being an NFL agent for over 35 years and working with guys that went through what you just described.
For sure.
And so what I did, not reading Harvey's book, is created Pro Mindset that mirrors a lot of the principles you're talking about. And so what I can tell you is that I was a awesome athlete in high school, 9 sports, all this stuff, nine sport letterman. But when I went to college, it kicked me back because I didn't train my mind. I didn't know. I was like you. When you were a rookie, you didn't know. You were nervous.
That's right.
You're playing an outside game instead of an inside game. You're looking at your circumstances instead of looking at your internal state. And I failed. And because I failed, and when I had 3 kids, you have 5 kids, but when I had my 3 kids, 2 of them were boys that liked sports as much as I did. I wanted to make sure they could go as far as they wanted to. You know, obviously desire to play in the pro level is very difficult, but that they wouldn't have they wouldn't trip over the same hurdles I did. I dealt with anger. I dealt with frustration. I thought the coach didn't give me a fair shake. I dealt with injuries and didn't know how to recover. All these things that everybody in the bigs do too. And both of my boys, one of them made it to the NFL for 3 years, and one of them's been playing over in Europe for a couple of years. But the bottom line is, what you described about letting it go is a concept that I use for all speed trainers. They'll use this resistance parachute so that they can create resistance. But I've never seen an athlete, a sprinter, ever run the race with the parachute on. They take it off. So when you're talking to somebody, so like when Harvey was talking to you, he was like telling you, let it go. Take off the parachute, bro. You can't carry all that stuff with you.
Yeah.
Right. And then what I've kind of coined a pocket voice is the story you tell yourself. So if I don't, we just met today. It would be absurd for me to tell you what I think you were thinking when you were 15.
Yeah.
Right. However, I kind of have an idea. Parents positioned this opportunity as you can be the hero for your brother.
Right.
You might have had some trepidation about, giving up bone marrow, and you're talking to your buddies at school and they're like, what are you doing? Yeah. I know you love your brother, but do you really want to do that? And at 15, you really don't know the scope of what's going on.
Correct.
So the pendulum swings. So if you're going to be the hero, if it works, the pendulum swings all the way to the other side and you get to be the GOAT. And I'm not talking about the greatest of all time. I'm talking about the victim, the blamer, the blame.
Right. That's right.
So you assume that. And that's the story you told yourself.
Yeah.
So I already know you had road rage.
Yeah.
Okay. When people, I hung up on people. I hung up on GMs. They didn't want to give me the money that I thought my player deserved. They weren't going to give him respect. I hung up on them.
Yeah.
It's totally unprofessional. But I had anger issues because of the same thing. So it really boils down to reprogramming your pocket voice, the story you tell yourself, which is actually rewriting your story, which is in alignment with what you talk about. And it's like, if you don't do that, that's where it all starts. That's where it all starts. But guess what? Until you have failure, you never go there.
Yeah. I talk a lot about rewiring, and you're nailing it. And, we speak the same language today, but, kind of like when you were going through college athletics and this and that, we didn't speak that language then, right? It's like we have rewired ourselves and understanding and perceptions and awareness. And we said, we want to change. We want to do something different. We want to be different. And it's like, I talk about the rewiring all the time, and it's like, it's funny, and it's not really funny, but I hear people all the time that they set these big goals, right? And then, I'll talk to people about goals, and they're like, oh, here we go again. We're going to talk about goals, the things I never hit and never achieved. I said, because you didn't get to the core of the problem. And the core of the problem is, if you've got a higher elevated goal, well, then you got to elevate yourself to the goal. You have to change. And people don't like change. But if I've got something that I want to achieve that I've never achieved in my life, I probably can't achieve it today unless I rise to the occasion, right? Which means I got to change, which means I got to change the way I feel, the way I think, the way I act, the way I speak. You talked about self-talk just a minute ago, and it's like, we got to stop listening to ourselves and start talking to ourselves. It's the only time we should talk more is to ourselves. We should listen more to other people and button up. But when we're having a conversation with ourselves, when that story in our mind is playing, we need to stop the story and stop listening to the old bullshit, the self-doubt, the fear. I can't do it. I didn't grow up that way. I'm not good enough. I'm not big enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not fast enough. That's all crap. That's all playing victim. That's an old story. You got to stop it and say, I am good enough. I'm strong enough. I'm great enough. I can do it. See, we got to change the way we speak, and not to other people, to ourselves, to the most important person. So self-talk and this whole rewiring process is so important. I had to rewire. Think about what I did. As a 15-year-old, I became a different person after my little brother's death because of something I thought and felt, and a story I played over and over and over until naturally I just became that person. I became it naturally. And just like you said, everything that I couldn't control on the outside would destroy me. So what did I need to fix? Just what you said. I needed to go internally, get to the core of the problem, and rewire those thoughts, rewire those emotions, so that I could then get to a place where I could get to a present moment and actually have greatness. And it kind of goes with one of my thoughts and saying is like, look, if you can get yourself to a place where you can prepare with everything you've got in your might, everything. And I mean, prepare mentally, physically, emotionally, like all in on it. And then go play that game or go live that day all out, knowing failure's a possibility. This is the day you discover your greatness, and not until, because think about it. Think about how many people today are holding back because of what someone might say or what they might think. I would tell you, who gives a damn? Who cares, right? It's like, if I fall down, laugh. I don't care. I'm getting back up, right? And it's like, if you can get to where, let me tell you, it's the most liberating thing in the world is when you can play all out, not caring and knowing and understanding failure is a possibility, but not holding back because of it. It's liberating. That's freedom.
Todd, 1,000,000% agree with everything you're saying. I just want to kind of add a couple things. One is the concept of alignment. What people don't realize when they change their goals is they're now out of alignment. And unless they change themselves, they can't get back into alignment with their goal. And so it's very normal that if you change only your goals, but you don't change how you show up, how you think, how you respond, how you work, how you prepare, how you practice, how you visualize, whatever things you got to do to build the bridge between where you're at and that new goal, it doesn't happen. And so it's really having a spirit of being like a change expert.
Yeah.
You know, I want to do something different. I got to change to do something different because, you know, like one of the things I think that's really difficult for us is that the world judges us and like responds to us by our human doingness instead of our human beingness, and we're human beings. And so one of the reasons why you were able to play in the bigs, because it's part of who you thought you were.
Yeah.
When you were 7 and 10 and 13, you thought you were a Major League Baseball player because your father was there, and you're going in the batting box every now and then. You're shagging balls. You're in the dugout getting guys drinks. You're doing whatever. The bottom line is that's who you thought you were. There's a lot of young men out there, and women too, that aspire to be professional athletes or politicians or doctors, whatever that is, but they don't think that's who they are.
Yeah.
Probably not going to happen.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting what is so powerful because we do become what we believe we're supposed to become or believe who we are, right? And, you know, it was 2 years ago, he was a senior in high school, and it was senior day. And for all the senior baseball players, they put all these things on the fence for the, you know, fans and parents to walk by, and the kids that wrote, you know, kind of like, hey, what was their best moment and this, you know, I have these things. And then they got photographs of them. And then they asked the $1 million question. And the $1 million question is, right, is like what their goal for what they want to do in their life, right? And this baseball team has a few guys on this baseball team that were like, they're legitimate. They got a chance, right? A chance. But it was interesting as I went through and I looked at all the seniors, only one player on that team said, I want to play Major League Baseball. No one else on the team had the courage, even if they wanted to put it. They put, I want to do this. I'm going to study this in school. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. And by the way, maybe they're 100%. They're probably 100% right, but maybe that's what they really want. But my guess was on that day, I was like, wow, there's only one? Like on a high school baseball team, that's a good baseball team. There's only one that says, I want to go do that. And I was so grateful, and it warmed my heart so much that one player was my son. And I thought to myself, I'm like, he had the courage to say, I want to play in the MLB. No one else put it. And I thought a lot about that. And I'm like, and you said it, he probably believes he's on a pathway to go there. He has that belief that that's where he's headed, right? I think that today, you know, the kids are smarter than when we grew up. I didn't think about percentages. I'm sure these kids are probably like, what's the chance, right? Or maybe they've been told the percentages are against you. What are you going to do if it doesn't work out, right? And I'm like, well, it's not going to work. If you're thinking about plan B in high school, plan A ain't working out. Like forget it. If there was ever a time to go all in on one thing, one focus, have one mission, high school, college athletics, minor league, whatever, that's the time. You're not looking for plan B. You got plenty of time in your life for plan B. Listen, I've lived so many plan Bs, but after my major league career, I was like, oh, I'll go try this or I'll go try that. And, you know, at the end of the day, but it's like, man, it has to be, you know, people talk about, you got to burn the boats, but yeah, there's no retreat, burn them. It's all in. I either do or I don't. And if you don't, and I tell my son this, if everything doesn't work out like you want it to, it'll work out like it's supposed to. But it's not about even sometimes achieving it. And we talked about this. What are you becoming? What are the lessons you learn that you can take from this piece and go multiply it into something else? It's what we learn. It's what
Absolutely.
if you don't go for it, if you never go for it in your life, if you never reach for it, then you don't know what you're capable of. You lose all sense of potential capacity and capability.
Todd, let me jump in and say that I don't know what the odds are for a high school athlete to play in the majors, but it's probably 1/10 of 1% or something similar to that.
Yeah, I have no idea.
But here's what I also can tell you, that no one plays in the bigs that didn't believe they could, commit to it, and understand how to outperform their talent. So what I've learned is that there's two things that society teaches us. Coaches teach us, parents teach this. Hey, it's the God-given talent you got and the hard work you put in. And that's your glass ceiling. That's your limit. That's as far as you're going to go. So what happens is, like your son, if he had the optics of what the bigs were looking for, he would have been drafted out of high school. That doesn't mean he can't play in the bigs. It just means he didn't have the optics. So the question is, how can he outperform his God-given ability plus the hard work he's put in? And the answer is real simple. This is what it looks like. 7 or 8 more hits out of every 100 bats.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's it.
So how do you get on base maybe 10 more times out of 100? So 1 in 10. So every 10 at bats, just one improvement on one. That's all it is. And your son will be in the bigs because he'll be a 330 hitter. Okay. So then how does he do that? And we can reverse engineer it and go back to, what does he tell himself when he's leaving the, he's in the dugout, he's on deck. Now he's walking into the batter's box and he's going against a guy that throws it. He throws the heat, man. And nobody on the team's been able to catch up to his speed. Before he gets in that batter's box, he's either struck out or not. There's nothing about talent. It's all about belief and can you think you can hit a 93-mile-an-hour fastball or whatever it is. And you only got to improve 1 out of 10. And he's a mid-300 hitter or more. And so that's what people don't understand is that, this is not rocket science. Are you going to, let's go to Vegas for a minute. You going all in on you? Because all his teammates, they didn't go all in on themselves. They might run a fast 40. They may be able to get to first base really fast. They may be able to steal bases. They may have a great arm. They may have power. That ain't going to get him to the bigs.
It's crazy. I just had this conversation with him and I said, what's the story you tell yourself the second before you step into the batter's box? Because that story is so important. Because it counts, right? Derek Jeter used to say the last thought he had when he left the on-deck circle is the one he generally did once he got into the batter's box. And it's like just the power and the understanding how powerful this thing is unbelievable.
Unbelievable. I've had clients that have outkicked their coverage. The scouts and the personnel people said he didn't have it. Played 10 years, made a lot of money, didn't look the part, looked like a FedEx truck driver, not a NFL offensive lineman. Played 11 years, won a couple of Super Bowls. So here's my thing that I've created the last 7 or 8 years. And I want to tell you this because I want your opinion on it. And then I want you to see how it applies to your son. I've created this concept called a performance bubble. And it's a mental zone of your genius where you can be the best you can be. And everything that's for you is in with you and everything that's not isn't. Belief and confidence is in. It's when you can get in the flow and noise, distractions, doubts, and fears don't get to come in. And then what happens? In the middle of a moment, in the middle of a play, in the middle of a bat, you start doubting. You could have the intention you're going to hit a home run, bases loaded, be the hero of the game. And your manager says, hey, don't strike out. And you're like, holy smokes. I was planning on hitting a grand slam. Now my coach, now you're having this tug of war in your mind on your way to the batter's box. What's coach saying? What's he meaning here? Is he doubting me? He doesn't think I can do it? Does he wish somebody else was in my spot? Is he going to put a pinch hitter in? I mean, all those stops. So God gave us breath. He gave us the ability to breathe. And when we breathe at a deep level, it changes us. That's why pitchers sometimes take a deep breath before they pitch. So why free throw shooters at all levels take a deep breath before they shoot a free throw. You should, as a batter, create a batter's box mindset. That when you're in the batter's box, anything that's not for you doesn't get to come in. And when it's corrupted, when it's infiltrated with some negative thought, you either step out of the batter's box and let it go and then step back in, or in between pitches, you take a deep breath and you get reconnected to whatever you thought you were going to be and what you planned to do, because that's all it would probably take to be one at bat better out of every 10.
So 1,000%. And I love it. And you said a lot there, right? And so if it's not for you, right, it's like we got to get rid of it. All right. So if somehow, some way, what the coach said or someone, or maybe it's you said, and you allowed something to get in because of your own voice. And it's funny, a lot of times I'll be walking around the house and, I might just shake my head and my wife will say, "Conversation with yourself?" I said, "Yeah, it's a good one." And it's like, hey, to this day, it's like those tools, these are what you just described would be one of the most, this should be taught at every rookie camp, right? And it's like, because it's so powerful. And at the end of the day, and think about it when you said breath, right? And I remember Harvey telling me, in, out, now I'm relaxed. I'm not tense and I'm relaxed. And my mind is on what I got to do. That's the pitch that everything flows. And you mentioned flow. And you mentioned like all those different voices, the coach, this could be someone in the stands. It's like when you're in that bubble, there could be 50,000 screaming fans and you can't hear anyone. It's dead silent, because your intensity of your focus and that voice on the inside is so important on what you have to do, right? I would love to, what you just said, I would love to have a photo of, right? And all the different bubbles off of it that you got to fight and battle to get into a place of a state of flow and in that zone and in that exact state that you need to be in on that down or on that pitch or on that shot, whatever it is. It's like golf. Golf is another, I used to say golf and pitching is a lot the same, because, everyone's watching your shot. Everyone's watching your pitch. Hey, if it's a bad one, all right, what do I got to do next? If it's a bad pitch, what do I got to do next? I can't focus on that one, right? And what you just described is so fascinating to me, because it's like, man, I would love to see a picture of that, because the picture of that is what we need the athlete to get and understand, so that they can see it, so they can understand it, so that they can work. They can work in that area, because it takes practice. It's kind of like when Harvey said, "Todd, let it go." It wasn't gone forever. I had to fight those voices again. But what he did was give me tools to fight the voices.
So let's go back to the 2024 World Series. Freddie Freeman in the bottom of the 10th, against the Yankees. I have a keynote and I show that video when I'm describing performance bubble, because he's in his batter's box, like bubble. And when they're talking about him, they're talking about, hey, this is what he dreamed of when he was 7 years old. Of course he did. Everybody that played baseball dreamed that.
Yeah.
Right? And he steps in the batter's box and he's in the zone. So if you want to recreate those big moments, recreate, like Zen and flow and being in the zone and all those things, you can't do it without having a performance bubble, because otherwise you let anything that could come in corrupt your thoughts. And what could come in could be your own self. Okay. And you've mentioned that a couple of times, and there's no question that's probably the most damaging one. But it's like, the combination of being in a bubble and being very clear about what gets to come in and what doesn't, and practicing it. Because just like you get, 4 at-bats a game, you got 4 chances to create that performance bubble when you're up at the plate. And every time, let's say, for example, you get a dozen pitches, you get 12 reps to practice that. And when you breathe in, you don't just breathe oxygen. You don't just breathe air. You breathe whatever you need. If you need belief, you breathe in belief. I'm breathing in belief. If I got to get rid of doubt, I'm breathing out. I'm exhaling doubt. So guess what? I just replaced it. Okay. And so at the end of the day, if especially baseball players understand that it's a nanosecond decision whether you're going to swing at the pitch or not. I mean, you're going through your whole routine. You got the bat above your shoulder, and you in a split second. And Hall of Famers and guys that are batting ninth, the difference isn't much.
It's not, it's the game within the game. You talk about, I got to breathe in belief and I got to, exhale, and I'm going to get rid of all the self-doubt. That becomes the game within the game. It's kind of like me walking around the house, shaking my head. And it's like, and my wife says the conversation, yeah, it's like, I might be replacing and I might be getting rid of something. I mean, no, I'm not doing that. And I'm battling and fight. But this is what could happen from huddle to huddle, from pitch to pitch, from a bat to a bat. It's the game within the game, right? And it's by the way, it's the most important game of the day, because how you play this will determine how you play that. I mean, and it's so fun for me because like when I get to be around young kids, young athletes, because look, I always tell them, I say, look, I'm going to give you something that I got at 28 in the middle of my major league career. And I say, just imagine if I would have gotten it at 18, and you see a lot of, especially high school athletes, they're playing the game basically physically to their physical level. But the higher you go up, you start to look around, you're going to get to a place someday where you look around and you're like, everyone's got my same physical ability and traits. The difference maker is the mind. And so it's a fascinating game. I call it the game of mindset. It's fascinating because, it's always under construction. You're always working on it. You're always trying to become more. I call it the never ending mindset, where it's like, what can I learn? Like, I came on as your guest today. I'm taking probably 10 times more away than you get to take today. And I appreciate that. I'm winning the game today because, man, you're sharing things with me and as you speak, I'm creating pictures in my mind, you see, and I'm positioning it. And because I want to take this knowledge base that you have and go create new stories for me. And I'm 60. And, a lot of people at 60, 65, they're thinking about retirement. I'm thinking about what's the next level for me. And we as a team, we develop 10-year plans, and it's hilarious. And people are like, 10-year plans, Todd, you're 60. I said, yeah. And at 70, I'm going to do another one to 80. And then at 80, another one to 90. And then when I get 90, I'm going to do another 10-year plan to 100. And when I get to 100, I'm just going to stop planning. But I'm like, hey man, I'm in. All right. Oh.
Okay. I want to tell them something that's near and dear to you. Because you were this person for your father many, many years ago, and now your son is this to you. If you're like a normal dad, you have a 10x appreciation for the success that your kids have compared to what you've had. And you've got 4 daughters, and when you've got a daughter that's 10. Your youngest is 10. So when she does her cheering or whatever she's doing and she excels at it, you feel better about it than she does.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So if we can stipulate to that, I want you to help your son, and you already have. I already know. But I'm going to ask you some questions that maybe can help you help him. What is the story he's telling himself that's holding him back? You shared earlier in this podcast that the story that held you back was you felt like you were the reason why your younger brother passed. Your son is telling himself a similar story, different facts, and it's holding him back.
Yeah.
And do you know what it is, or does he know what it is?
So it's interesting. That's a great question because, his senior year in high school, he really started to develop and he started to become what he wanted to become. He was all state or whatever, all region, all this, all that. And, he led his team in hitting and hits and runs scored and RBI and all these categories and play shortstop. And then there was a big article. The Arizona Republic here did a big article on him. And I'm kind of like, oh, no, right? Like, everything that I've guarded for him to be his own man, I'm like, here we go. And they asked him the question about his grandfather and his father. And he answered, I'm going to be better than those guys. But his answer got me thinking, it's like, oh, he's had these thoughts. So he's wearing the last name. But the beauty of the article was he's not a pitcher, he's paving his own road. So I bought that. I'm like, okay. So I went to him and I said, listen, I need you to understand. I go, bro, you're on your own. Like me and my dad, your grandfather, we weren't good enough to do what you're doing. So I turned it and I said, you're paving something new. And as I go, I said, you're a college shortstop. We weren't good enough to be college shortstops. I said, do you get it? I said, you see, we were pitchers. So I almost separated the sea from, because I heard him say, oh, I'm going to whatever. And I'm kind of like, oh, I'm like, watch out. I'll give you an example. When it's crazy, but when he was like, it was the first time they came out of coach pitch into where the kids pitch. And he played on this team in Cal Ripken. And I was so mad at the coach, but they put the names on the back of the uniforms. And the reason I'm mad is because I fought those shadows.
Yes,
I fought the opinions of other people. And I was told I'm not like my father a million times, right? And so when they put the name on the back, I'm like, man, and there was like 6 or 7, maybe even 8 former major league players' sons on the team.
wow.
And I'm like, what are we doing putting their names on the back of the uniform, right? So now everyone's going to, and I'll never forget it, ever. And my son went into pitch, and the umpire would stand behind the mound in first year coach pitch, not behind home plate. And he sees my son, and he's got Stottlemyre on the back of his deal. But I see my son come in, and he's like, all of a sudden, I see this tension where all he's ever done is just play the game for fun. Now he's standing on the mound, I see tension, and I'm kind of like helping with the coach. And I say, hey, coach, I call timeout. I go see him, and I get out there. And before I can say anything to my son, the umpire says, hey, is this Stottlemyre, the guy, is this his kid? I'm like, yeah, I'm his dad, dude. Like, please back off, right? Like, let him enjoy. And I looked at my son. I go, what are you doing, bro? Like, why the tension? I go, it's just like playing shortstop. Have fun, bro. It's just a game. But I'll never forget that moment. And then all along, as I've watched my son, because my son was a slow developer, so he was never the best guy on the team for the longest time. So imagine his father played Major League Baseball. His grandfather was a legend in Major League Baseball as a player and as a coach. And now here's this little kid playing with these bigger kids. And he's not even like, they don't even look at him like it's anything. But all of a sudden, he develops into this where they want to write about him. And I'm like, whoa, here we go. Now it's his time, right? So I wanted to, just in case he's had any of those competing things, I'm sure my son at some point was like, man, like I'm on this team and I'm 14 and I'm like, I'm not even good enough to make the starting lineup. And my dad and my grandfather play like, what's wrong with me? And when I seen the opportunity and got a chance, I dove right in and I said, you're doing something we weren't good enough to do. And you're paving your own road. And I can just see how it's almost like a freedom. Now, what's interesting, in high school, like as a little guy, he would wear number 30. It was my father's number and it was my number. And when he got to high school, he didn't want number 30 anymore. He wanted his own number. And I was like, this is awesome. And then when he went freshman year in college, he wanted his own number. Now, what's interesting is coach called me the other day. He's down in junior college in San Jack. And he said, and because I said, I know TJ likes, number 3 and number 7 or whatever. But one of the coaches called me and they said, hey man, I showed up and your son is wearing number 30. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, that's the one he picked. That's the one he wanted. And I'm like, wow. Now my son doesn't even know I know he's wearing number 30 right now because it's the fall program. So I haven't said anything. And the coach is like, oh man, you didn't know? And he says, whatever you do, don't tell him I told you, right? And he told the coach says, number 30, huh? And he happens to be a guy I played with. Woody Williams is the pitching coach. And Woody said to my son, he says, TJ, he says, when your dad left Toronto, I wanted his number too. And TJ goes, nah, he goes, this jersey just fit the best. So you can see he's like, right? No, this one just fit. And the coach was, Woody was like, I get it, and just kind of left it alone. But my son to this day hasn't said, hey, Dad, I'm wearing number 30. So I'm like, and he doesn't know I know. So I think what it tells me is I'm okay wearing your number now because I'm my own man now, my own player. That's my hope and prayer for it. So
I've got a couple thoughts. One is that if you would go down memory lane again to when you were 12 and 15 and 18 and 20, and almost like the story you were struggling with, you were going through an identity development. You were constructing your identity. And am I going to be like my dad? Am I going to be better than my dad? Can I be as good as my dad? Can I play in the bigs too? All those kind of things. And of course, friends and media and different people ask those kind of questions. So TJ's been asking those questions in his head for 10 years at least. And the answer isn't, can I be like my dad? The answer is, can he be the best that God created him to be in combination with the work that he's put in and the mindset that he shows up with? Because that is going to end up being his best. And if he's his best, so it's that age-old question as a coach. You can ask your team, and I'll ask you, would you rather win but not play your best, or play your best and fail and not win? And that's a tough one. Would you rather get the dub and not have one of your best outings so you can have, get a bigger contract, shows up better in the statistics? Or would you rather every time get better and ball out and understand, like Harvey said, that once the ball leaves your hand, it's out of you could throw a strike right down the middle of the plate and the umpire calls it a ball. You can't control that. There's everything. You can't control anything after that unless the guy hits it back to you. So the question for your son is, can he have a mindset of focusing on being his best? Because his best is enough. And if that ends up in being in the bigs, great. If it doesn't, great. Because what's going to happen at some point in time, your son's going to be done.
Yeah.
40, he could be 22.
Right.
But he's going to be done. He's going to now either have trauma or he's going to have a badge of success.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what the outcome was.
Yeah.
As much as people think. It's how he's processed it. And so my final thought on that is, we have these things called identity killers. They're identity attackers. Perfection is one of the worst. In your mind, you're like, I wasn't perfect. I could have been better. Instead of focusing on what you're doing, you're focusing on what you didn't do. The next one is comparison. That's what TJ naturally has because of you and your dad and your brother. And it's like, it's normal. And when he's not comparing, his roommate is, his girlfriend is.
Yeah.
The first time he gets 4 hits in a game down at, in San Antonio, they're going to write an article. And all of a sudden he's back into, there's going to be somebody on the team that really doesn't know. I didn't know your dad and your grandpa both played.
Yeah.
So comparison is another one. And the last one is something that you have said multiple times in this conversation. And that's the attachment to outcomes.
Yeah.
When you're attached to the outcome, you got problems.
Yeah.
Because the outcome sometimes is a scoreboard. Sometimes it's just, the stat sheet. Think about how many batters sometimes, have a broken bat and they end up having a bad swing, check swing, and ends up being a hit. And think about the warning track power guys that hit the deepest part of the park, an unbelievable hit, but it was like 2 feet too short.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, the most important thing we can do as a dad, from my perspective, besides provide and protect and all those normal things, is help our kids formulate almost like one of these hyper-confident identities. That it doesn't matter if they want to be doctors, lawyers, IT guy, it doesn't matter. They believe they can.
Yeah. I love it, man. It's like, I talk all the time about how we're so attached to the scoreboard that we take the focus off what we need to be focused on, and that's the process, right? And we miss out on the greatness of the process or the progress in the process because we're so attached to the freaking scoreboard. A lot of times I'll tell my son, I say on first pitch, I said, hey man, I can't wait for the day you swing and miss and fall down or lose your balance or something because of your aggression on strike one. I said, I can't wait. I said, I didn't say hit a home run. I said, I can't wait for you. Sometimes I tell him, I say, hey, or like a lot of times I'll speak to him and say, and I tell him, I said, bro, it doesn't make me feel great when you're 4 for 4. I'm not I'm not like, whoo, look at my son. And I'm not I go, man, it's about you going out and laying it all out there. Even on the days you're 0 for 4. I said, I'm standing tall. I said, you see, I love you the same. 4 for 4, 0 for 4. My love for you don't change. My pride, my being a proud father doesn't change in your scoreboard. It's your process and how you go about the game. Go play it with all your might. You know, he had a young second base. He was playing shortstop. His second baseman was a sophomore. He was a senior shortstop on his high school baseball team. And I said, hey, man, that's your guy. You got to take care of him. And at the end of the year, I'll never forget it. That second baseman, because my son was now moving on to college, they'd lost in the playoffs. So they played their final game. That second baseman cried like a baby hugging my son. Like his mentor is now moving on. And I think to myself, and I told my son, I go, that's winning right there. I said, because of the way you approached your game and how you helped him develop it. I said, TJ, I said, he's never going to forget you, ever. That's powerful. Like, to me, that's winning at the highest level. That's a big deal.
But he has a different definition of winning, and the people that are really living life are not using the scoreboard to define winning. They're using the things you're talking about: relationships, mentorship, being there for somebody, picking them up when they need to be picked up. All those kind of things that happen in sports, in a locker room. Coach, I cannot believe what time it is. This thing flew by. I'm like thinking we're 30 minutes in and we're almost, 108 hour and 8 minutes. Here's what I'd love to do. I want to thank you for being on today. And I want you to, you're an author. You've written to kind of share, pick one of them and kind of share what the theme is and maybe why you wrote it and what kind of impact you hope it makes.
Yeah, they were both those books, and I'm working on the third book right now. It's funny is like both those books had a lot of meaning for me writing it. And what I mean by that is I literally went into writing those books thinking, I don't care if anyone ever buys it. I need to write it for me. And the first one is called Relentless Success. And you know that when you write books, it's like long after they've been written, you look back on them and you're like, geez, there's so much more to it. I mean, it's like, look how amateur this book is. But I love that book, Relentless Success. And I wrote that book. I was with my father. Well, first of all, I was in Arizona. My mom and dad lived in Sammamish. My mom still lives there in the house. But she had called and I was driving down the 101. I can remember like it was yesterday. And she was like, Dad's not good. You got to get here now. And he'd been battling multiple myeloma for years. And he'd been in and out of ICUs. And it was a tough moment. It was a tough time. And she was like, you got to get here now. And I was like, I'll never forget, literally went right to the airport. I got on an airplane. I boarded that airplane and went en route from Phoenix to Seattle. When en route, I was like, when I land, I pray he's going to be alive because of the urgency. My mother never said, you got to get here like now. And I didn't know. And I landed, I went straight to the hospital and he was in ICU and he was alive. And I was grateful for that. What the craziness was 3 days later, from ICU to 3 days later, he walked out of that hospital. Now the doctors couldn't believe it. Our family was like, we were all like, I mean, he looked like it was the end to 3 days later. I mean, it's hard to leave ICU 3 days later and go home, but it was 3 days after coming out. And it was the craziest thing because when we got to the house, he said to me, he says, let's take a drive in the mountains. I said, let's go. So I'm driving his pickup and we're driving through Snoqualmie and all of that up there. It's beautiful. And he says to me, he says, someday I might buy a home up here for me and Mom. And I'm thinking to myself when he said that, Dad, I want you to get through today. And that statement, though, that he said bothered me all night. I couldn't sleep that night. I was staring at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy was on his deathbed 2-3 days ago. How in the heck could he possibly have a vision for later on? Like he may buy a place up here for him and my mother. And I'm like, how does this guy? And he was inspiring me. It was the highest form of inspiration for me as a son ever, because I'm watching him fight for every breath for one more day, but I'm seeing him pour into others with the same disease, calling them on the phone, giving them hope. And I'm seeing him fight to stick around for our family. And I was just like, this guy's the greatest warrior I've ever, it's like, I've never seen anybody, a warrior like this. And that night I'm thinking to myself, it's like, man, and it hit me. I grew up at Yankee Stadium. I stood in the outfield grass next to Mickey Mantle. Boogie Berra was my dad's first manager. He played with Whitey for Roger Maris. I mean, and I went to the stadium every day, and I was around an environment growing up around greats. It was like going to the school of champions. And then all through my life, I had extraordinary people through my dad's relationships mentor me, for me to get better, for me to become more. And, you know, whether it was my father or one of his teammates, Harvey Dorfman, Cito Gaston, Tony La Russa, Dave Stewart, Dennis Eckersley, Ozzie Smith. I mean, I could go on and on. All these people that I had, they were always helping me become more. And in that moment, that night, I realized watching my dad serve other people, I go, I've never served anyone. I've never taken my experiences, my knowledge, the things that I've gotten from my mentors, the things that I've learned in my life, and ever given them to anyone else. And I thought, I'm going to write a book. And it was funny because at the time, I remember when I told my wife, I'm going to write a book. She goes, Todd, she goes, you make up words. Like people invite you to come speak and they're like, you don't even say the right words sometimes. How are you going to write a book? And we kind of laughed about it. I said, don't worry, we'll get a couple editors. But I went downstairs after not sleeping all night. The room is upstairs and my dad was sitting in his chair and I said, Dad, I'm going to write a book. And he said, you should. And I was like, I said, well, Dad, I didn't tell you what I was going to write the book on. He says, well, what are you going to write the book on? I said, I want to write the book on all the lessons that I've gotten from other people that helped me when I was on my back. They helped me get back to my feet and climb the next mountain. And it starts with you, Dad. And he goes, oh, that's going to be a great book, Todd. And he goes, I can't wait to read it. Same guy that got out of ICU a couple days earlier. And I'm thinking to myself, and that book became a mission for me because my father says, I can't wait to read it. And I thought, I have got to get this book written and published so my father can read that book before he passes. So for me, relentless success is more than what I'd gone through. It's what I needed to go through to be assured my father was going to get a chance to read it. By the way, I have never told that story until right now. You pulled it out of me.
Did he read it?
And I got it written and he got a chance to read it. And for me, when I look back on it, so when I see relentless success, for me, I look at it and I say, my dad got to read. He got to read about it because so many of the lessons in relentless success came from him. And I wanted to honor my father with it. And I wanted to honor my father, but I also, for the first time in my life, I wanted someone to be able to pick up that book and read it that might have been in a place that I was in, and this could be their way out. And then The Observer, the next book, was all about Harvey Dorfman, about stepping back from your thoughts, your emotions, your state, observing it. If you don't like it and it's not serving you, your bubble, then frickin' change the story. Become the observer. So that's the reason I wrote that book. This next book is probably going to be called Relentless Mindset. Change your mind, change your life. Because it's all about how we think. It's about the perceptions we have, what we focus on, the state we're in. But ultimately, what thought are you having that you believe that's driving that behavior? Because we got 60, 80,000 thoughts thrown through our hand, but it's the ones we believe that drive our state. Maybe it's the one that we believe that we need to question and audit and say, why do I believe that? And why do I think that's true? Because my truth is what I'm going to make out of it, right? I became the killer of my little brother. That became true to me, even though it was a lie. I lived a lie for 12 years. How many people are living a lie today that they claim is a truth that they need to go and rewire themselves so that they can climb the next mountain and achieve so much more than they've ever achieved? And I'm not talking about money and success. I'm talking about who we become, who we influence, and who we lead in our life. There you have it, my friend.
That was awesome. That was awesome. I'm going to give you 2 challenges.
Ooh, I love it.
Okay, so because men need to be led by men, your son needs you to be you've already done it. He's moved out of the house, but it's like the way you talk about your father is remarkable. What can you tell your son that you haven't told him? That if you have an early demise and you don't make it to 100, He's going to tell his people about you. He's going to tell his future spouse about you. So what moment can you create? Because we're both in the mindset field. We know our thoughts have thoughts, and sometimes we think about what we're thinking about, those kind of things. And one of the things that I love, and I told this to one of my boys here in the last probably 2 months, is I'm one of one. I am one of one. I'm the only guy on the planet that wants you to be better than me, richer than me, happier than me, have more success than me. I'm one of one. Because your friends, right? Your friends, your kids' friends want to be better than your son. There's always somebody that wants to get, your business partners want to make more money than you. It's like dads are one of one.
It's crazy how we've never met in person. Here we are. How is it that we think so much alike? As I told you, I got 5 kids. I tell them all the time, I said, I need you to get everything from me. And I said, but then when you get everything from me, I need you to stand on my head. And that becomes the trampoline to your next platform. I said, I want you to have more success. I want you to have more happiness, more joy. I want you to experience more things in your life than I ever experienced in mine. I am not the person that says, look at me, I'm your father, and hold them back. I want them to fly, and I want them to get every thought I've ever had or every emotion I've ever felt, every experience I've ever had. And I want them, and I tell them all the time, stand on my head and use it for a trampoline for your life.
I
Like
love that.
make mine look small.
That is your 4th book.
That would be good. Wouldn't it?
Yeah. Stand on my head and use it as a trampoline is book number 4. That metaphor is amazing. So, okay. Somebody wants to have you speak. They want to check you out. Todd, where they can work.
toddofficial.com. I laugh when I say it because I'm like, what's so official about me? But no one can spell Stottlemyre, so we had to come up with something. So I was like, what are we going to do here? By the way, it is hilarious. I mean, there's been a few times where I've looked at my wife, I go, you spelled our last name wrong. But yeah, so it's toddofficial.com, on our website. Everything is right there. If you want to follow us on social media, you can get it from our website. If you're interested in, me speaking, keynotes, working with companies, whatever it is, everything can be found on our website, toddofficial.com.
Awesome. Todd, you were awesome. I really enjoyed our conversation today. Really enjoyed the chat. We do have a lot of things in common, except for you played in the bigs for 15 years. I was in the bleachers.
Yeah, but you know what's funny? I got to tell you something. I'm going to come clean. Knowing you, we did our research, and Tommy, has spoken highly and actually we had dinner with Tommy. I don't know, it's been 6-8 months, and he was telling us about you at that dinner and then your sons and the success and mindset and all of this. So I come into this going, I'm probably facing a giant, and we all have the same book, BS. And I'm like, am I good enough to be interviewed by this guy? And then I thought to myself, it's like, what kind of freaking conversation is that? Look, I only know what I know. I've experienced what I've experienced. I've learned what I've learned. I've felt what I've felt. I've gone through what I've gone through. And it's kind of like what you said, I'm one-on-one. I can only share me, my thoughts. I'm not here to make something up. It's kind of like, just be authentic. But coming into this, it's like, I felt human, those human lies and emotions that, are you good enough? So we all go through it. It's like, I went to coach a company in Canada and I had to coach them from 9 to 5. And I was like, I got to talk all day. Like, am I good enough? So everything we teach, we still practice. Yeah. Because we're flawed as human beings, and the BS can also enter our minds. But the beauty and the gift and the blessing is that through it, we've acquired tools so we don't hang on to baggage for a day or for an hour. We hang on to it for a minute and we can get rid of it. So we have to teach and help others also drop those bags, those lies. So this is, man, I'm honored. I'm humbled. This has been fun for me. It was a pleasure to meet you. I can't wait to meet you in person, and let's stay connected, my friend.
Well, I gotta finish with, I had the same thoughts with you. I'm like,
we're
hey,
human.
I don't normally think of any questions in advance. I want it to be very organic. And today I had like 2 questions in my head. I'm like, I gotta have something, So it's like, it's very normal. But here's the beautiful thing is that The sweet spot for everyone, you, me, and everybody on the planet, is being unabashedly who you are and not being and really embodying who you are and who God created you to be. And if you don't like how you show up in this world and you don't like how you interact with people and how you respond to situations, you can always rewrite your story, change how you show up. But when you do, always be who you are, because the worst thing you can do is try to be somebody else. So, all right, brother. All right, hang in there. Hey, want to thank everybody, all the guests all the listeners on Pro Mindset for jumping in today. This was amazing. A lot of bars, a lot of gold today. I want you to earmark this podcast, re-listen to it, and apply these principles to your life, especially if you're in one of those places right now where you're thinking you want to be somewhere else. You want to be someone else. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Hey, it's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and more importantly, I hope you gained a pro mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast, and I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.